Hello, I'm Bob Rashka, and I'm going to speak today about my experiences prior to going to Vietnam. And in January of 1968, I received orders, I was still in England, to go to survival school at Fairchild, Washington. And that surprised me because I had just completed survival school in December 1965, just before going to England. And these orders were for a 4-day survival school in Seattle, Washington. I'm sorry, for Spokane, Washington. Anyway, we came back stateside, my family and I, and went up to Wisconsin, then got a home down in Florida. And then Susie and Lee flew out to Los Angeles while I flew up to Spokane, Washington to go to my survival school. Anyway, when I got to survival school, it was just a ground school only, and not many people were going to it. It was just found that they just wanted a bunch of pilots who have a good chance of being shot down, and the school was to teach you a skill to communicate back to the United States if you were a POW. That's what they called the survival school. But anyway, I finished that 4-day survival school, then went down to Los Angeles and met Lee and Susie, and for a couple of days before heading overseas to Vietnam. Now, the survival school, actually all they taught me was a code. And the code was to be used if you were shot down in a POW, and you're allowed to write a letter home, and how to use this code to, all they wanted was names of other pilots that were POWs or anything else that was necessary to tell the U.S. Air Force. And of course, if you were allowed to write a letter home, you use this code in the letter to give your information. Anyway, and every month when I was in Vietnam, Da Nang Air Base, Vietnam, 366 TAC Fighter Wing, 390th TAC Fighter Wing, I was required to write a letter to a man who did not exist, but his address was somewhere in Colorado. So once a month I wrote a letter using the code that was taught, and I'd put a code in this letter to this man who did not exist there in Colorado. And once a month I got a letter from this man that did not exist using my code to give me a message. And I had to decipher that letter from him to get the message that he wanted to give me. It was just to keep me in training and experience so that if I was shot down in a POW and I was allowed to write a letter home to anybody, I could put a message in this letter. Nobody would know it, who it was or what it was saying. Mom, Dad, or my wife, they would just get a letter from me and that's all. But they were told that, I'm sure Mom and Dad and my wife were not told, but if I ever wrote a letter home, an office from the Air Force would contact this person and ask for a copy of the letter. And Susie would, or my dad or my mom or Susie would make a copy of the letter and send it to this office in Spokane, Washington. They would decipher it and read my code in the letter. How the code worked anymore, I don't know, but I don't remember. But it was all very easy to decipher for the guy who knew what the code was. And fortunately, I never had to write a letter from a POW camp. And so I have forgotten how the code worked, but it was a good way to write a code, and every pilot had a different code. And there's one office in Spokane, Washington, Air Force office, that kept the code of each individual pilot. So if that pilot was shot down in POW, that office in Spokane would be contacting the pilot's family, and hopefully they would get a letter and ask for a copy of the letter. And the copy of the letter did not mean a thing to the families because they could not, there was nothing special written. It's just a code that they had, Air Force had figured out for us to use. And fortunately never had to use it.